You hear a lot about mom guilt these days, but let's be honest, dads have guilt too.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurial dads and some of the struggles you have and how you can free yourself from that guilt.
Are you frustrated by a lack of momentum in your business? Tired of putting in long hours doing what everyone says you should and still not making money? Sounds like you're ready for Lifestyle Builders. We'll help you get back on track, taking action, and seeing results. Head over to joinlifestylebuilders.com today to get started. All right. So again, we just did an episode previous to this about the dangers of mom guilt. And the one thing that we talked about before we jumped into the episode was obviously we know that there are a lot of different family dynamics these days. And there are also different dynamics in relationships where moms are not always the caretakers and dads are not always the breadwinners. So we just want to say that, and a little bit of a disclaimer here, we are calling this episode Dad Guilt, and it's typically aimed at, the dads that are guilty about working and being away from their kids. But again, it's very important to listen to both episodes and, kind of identify the pieces that apply to you from each.
Yeah, absolutely. So kicking this off, it's interesting because like you said, we hear a lot about mom guilt, and
moms are very vocal.
Yes, they are. And even in the last episode, part of what we had talked about was how the role oftentimes of women and of mothers was like that caregiver, that stay at home. And as women have started, having careers, stepping into the breadwinner role, a lot of times they've taken more on. And what's happened on the other side of that has been now with the roles of women often shifting, the roles of men are often shifting in the opposite direction. So where men were oftentimes the breadwinner, having to be strong and take care of everything, now it's often confusing and challenging for a lot of fathers who are now maybe taking that role.
Yep.
Especially entrepreneurs where, we're now home and maybe in some cases, we're not the breadwinners.
Yep.
And especially because in society, men are supposed to be tough and strong and not tough daddy.
Inside joke. That's what he plays with our kids all the time.
Yeah. So when our kids have nightmares, I just tell them to invite tough daddy in, and tough daddy helps take care of the nightmares.
Because most of the time he's goofy daddy.
Yes, I am. But so what it comes down to is then it's confusing and it's very challenging, I think, for a lot of fathers to understand where their role fits in, especially because society has all these expectations. And just like with most things, when you try to step outside of that, you can get resistance or criticism or all of that. And, it can be very challenging.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think as well as that, there's this weirdness of the equal parenting that both parties are trying to navigate and figure out. And it's really hard to put the blinders on and turn off the societal norms and the societal expectations of each of you. And heaven forbid you're one of the dynamics that society doesn't consider normal. Then you've got all these other expectations on you. They talk about single moms a lot. There's a lot of single dads, and they struggle with different situations and different challenges that not enough people are talking about. And I think it's really tough when you are one of those dads who's trying to forge his own path and, turn off the noise from society. There's no one out there for you to follow. There's no one out there helping you figure out how to do this thing. And there's not a lot of support. I feel like moms, we tend to band together and
there's
we're very
all sorts
loud.
of mom groups and all of that. We create
our own groups and we find our own people. And, I have a ton of mom, and especially mom entrepreneurs that I feel comfortable getting vulnerable with. We can talk about everyday life. And, we know that it stays within our circle and it's a safe place. And I feel like dads struggle to find that because for you guys, it's really hard to find other dads who are open and vulnerable and aren't going to turn around and call you a pussy because you cry or you share your feelings and you're getting open and honest with the other guys in the group.
Absolutely.
So I think to be fair, we're all dealing with things, but you're dealing with some different things that maybe we as moms don't necessarily understand. And I think we are on this like war path right now with the feminist movement and with moms like taking our power back as women, that we often are so loud, we forget to listen and validate those things that you guys are going through while you're helping us you're trying to help us empower ourselves. You're trying to help us get our power back and become equals, but we're not always equally listening to you.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, like, it's not a win-lose relationship. And I think that's the big challenge a lot of people have is when they see a movement like that, they're like, well, if they quote unquote take some of this power back, that they're going to take it from me. Like, no, it's not. Like, we can all win together with this. And I think that's a big challenge people have. And I was actually really excited this year. I got to attend a conference called Dad 2.0 Summit. And I actually got the opportunity to speak a little bit about work-life balance. And I talked about a lot of being entrepreneurs, both being stay-at-home parents, essentially, and how we navigate all that. But the conference was really cool, and I highly encourage. And what was a couple things? One, if this topic is interesting to you, I would encourage you guys to check the summit out, because tickets are very low cost, and the whole summit was talking about this type of stuff. And Dad 2.0 is really the second iteration of that, right? So it's not that traditional view of it. And there's a lot of conversations about really important topics, and men go, and there were a lot of women there as well. And I just want to share a story from this that was really disheartening for me to hear. So a lot of the fathers at this summit, you know, are stay-at-home dads. You know, their significant other is often like the breadwinner. And so they're now in this role where society is expecting like the mother to be the stay-at-home parent. And so they're struggling because, one, society doesn't see them that way. And two, like you said, there's not a lot of groups for fathers. And so this one father I was talking to, he had moved to a new city, and he was like, they didn't know anybody. And he's now this stay-at-home father, and he was looking for support. And he reached out to a local moms group and said, hey, you know, can I join? Can I participate? And the leader said, well, let me go check with the moms. And they came back, and she's like, you know, I'm sorry, I want to let you in, but the rest of the moms don't want you here because they're afraid you could be a child predator. And when he was telling me the story, and I can only imagine how he felt. So you're a father, you're stepping up, taking care of your kids. That's your day. That's your world. And you just want to be around other people, other humans. And because you're a man, women don't want you, mothers don't want you in this group because they think you could be a child predator. Or like, that blew my mind. And I think really just kind of set the stage for where things are at today and how challenging it is, especially when we have all this masculinity and what we're supposed to be. And now you can't even get support or support other people, you know, because of your gender.
Yeah. And I think it's very isolating.
Absolutely.
Because unless you're in a big city like New York City or, you know, Chicago, or if you're in a state where we've kind of bucked off those societal norms a little bit more than some of the others, like, you may very well be alone. You may be the only stay-at-home dad in your town. And that can be so isolating. And I think, again, it speaks to that hard to find other people that are going to understand what you're going through, because in a lot of the families where we more fit the societal norm of, you know, one mom, one dad, you're not necessarily going to find yourself and people that you can be around with in those family dynamics, especially if the dad's working and you're a stay-at-home dad. You know, like they aren't going to understand some of those challenges you're going through.
Yeah. And so what was really cool, I mean, there was a lot of emotion at this conference because, as like when I go to conferences, as you guys know, I just network. I talk to as many people as I can. And I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest, when I went. And the intro kicked off, and you know, Doug French, who runs the event, he kicked the intro off, and I'm going to butcher this, but he's like, you know, what I'm going to tell you guys right now, I just want you to realize how many of these things wouldn't have been able to happen like 40 years ago. So he's like, you know, we have an African-American double PhD, you know, woman who's going to be interviewing, a gay father in a mixed race relationship with mixed race children. And he just went on and he's like, do you realize how many of those things wouldn't have been possible 40 years ago? And so just kicking the event off like that, I was like, wow, like this is where I need to be. And these are the conversations that need to be had. And the guy was actually Sean T. A lot of people know him from like the fitness programs. And he was just talking about, a lot of these expectations and norms and a lot of the challenges that they had to face, with trying to have kids and, with being in, a gay relationship and all of that.
And mixed race relationship.
And like he was a celebrity. So a lot of people know him. So just all of those dynamics that came up into it. And, it was really cool to see that there are now groups talking about this and for men to be able and fathers to be able to support each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about it from the entrepreneurship perspective. There's a lot of expectations even still within the entrepreneur community of, how you should be running your business and, this talk about the hustle and the Gary V type vibe of you got to do the work and you got to hustle all the time and you got to build your business. There's a lot of people that we've encountered that they kind of don't know where they fit because they're the types of dads who are working for freedom to be with their family. But a lot of the vibes and the trends with the online entrepreneurship space are all about working like 80 hours a week and scaling your business and, making the sacrifices now so that you can do those things later. And, people are starting to stand up about it and say, no, I don't want to make the sacrifices now. Like the reason I chose this for my life was because it allows me the freedoms to be home and spend time with my kids, spend time with my wife, to show up as the man that I want to show up as and that I couldn't before. So you've got all these expectations around you of how you should be running your business, of how you should be as a man, this whole bucking off the trend of this toxic masculinity that, our culture is still very much stuck in. And the ease of people judging you online, like have you felt some of that as we started to step into these roles and to do some of this? As soon as you left your job, people were judging you because you left a 6-figure job. You're doing this online thing that they don't understand. They're judging you like, well, are you able to take care of your family? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I think I'm a little different than a lot of people where over the years with the experiences I've had and everything else, stuff doesn't bother me as much. But I mean, yes, all of that stuff comes hurling my way. When we decided to have me leave my consulting job and just be full-time entrepreneurs with our 3 businesses, I had a lot of hate. And it was like, how could you do that as, the man of the house and as the breadwinner to leave, a job making that much money, a lot of people think that money is where it's all at. And where it's all at for me? Every morning I get to get up and get our kids out of bed and feed them breakfast and sometimes just snuggle or whatever else. And every night we get to read them a story and put them in bed. And 2 years ago when I was, doing consulting and traveling and everything else, that wasn't part of my life, and I remember just nights sitting in the hotel room crying because I was living in another city more than I was living at home. Like I felt like I was cheating on my family with this other city. Like I would legit be gone longer. And you were like a single mother during that time. And I remember there were like, we would do video chats and stuff. There were weeks where I wouldn't even want to do like a call because that made it so much more difficult. And I remember there were times where like you would post a picture or a video or something, and it was all just a reminder to me that I'm missing out on all these events that fathers get to have and should be having because I have this need or this feel to make this money, and that's putting ahead of what I actually want to be as a father. And I remember we had a lot of tough conversations, and we were both going through stuff because I think we were envious of each other.
Yeah.
Like I was making a very nice income and I was enjoying a lot of the work I was doing, but I was so jealous that you got to stay at home with the kids. Like my goal, I was like, man, if you want to go be the breadwinner and I can stay home with the kids, like I would love that. And on the flip side, you're like, okay, we have 2 kids. I'm not sleeping at night. And every week you get to just go leave and
Yep.
hang out with other adults and, do all these things. And so you were very jealous of me. And like, I know for a while that jealousy just let both of us not show up well for each other.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I think we sat down and really went back to our core and like our life planner. That is the reason that that thing exists and why we start everybody with it. Because when we talked about what we wanted our lives to look like and looked at what they were actually now, we realized there was a big disconnect and we needed to make a change. Right. But it wasn't until we took that time and said, what's truly important to us? And then just like we talked about on the moms episode, first identifying that and recognizing it. And then 2, saying, well, what do I want it to look like? Yeah. And let's make a change. And so I had no concern about what other people said when we made that transition, because I knew we were doing it for the right reasons. And one of our core values is do the right thing. Yep. So as long as we're living in alignment with that, I'm good. Yeah. But with that said, there is a lot of hate that gets hurled at anyone that's doing something different. And I think as men, it's also a lot more challenging because we're not supposed to be open and it's more difficult to find those groups. And one of the best things that I have is a group of mostly fathers that, some are in a mastermind, some we're just chatting with periodically, but we're all supporting each other because we're all going through the same stuff. And I think because as entrepreneurs, we just have to do so much personal growth in order to succeed that we're able to have more of these real conversations, and not like maybe years ago where I felt like I had to show up a certain way because that's how the company expected me to look. That's how my team members expected me to look, etc.
I think even if you go back to when we first started our business online, we very much were trying to portray what other people thought we should be. Like when you go back to our first podcast and how like awkward and like we were reading off of note scripts, and we kind of thought like, oh, well, we have to show up this way because then people will know we actually know what we're talking about, as opposed to now we're a little bit more authentic and we goof around and we laugh at each other and we don't have to be serious all the time to convey the important message that we're trying to convey. Like we can be us and still show people, hey, like we know what we're talking about. We have experience. We're confident in how we're showing up as people, as spouses, as parents. So, like I think just that growth itself, a lot of people are starting back where we were and they're unsure of how to get to the point where they want to be.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, like we talked about figuring out who you are, and we talked about that on the moms episode.
Same for dads.
It's the same thing with dads. And like I know for me, for a long time, a lot of my identity, and for most people, is tied up in the job you have. And so I felt like I had to show up a certain way and be a certain way. And for a long time, even with our businesses, there were pieces of that I brought over that helped, and there were pieces of that I brought over that didn't let my true personality come out. And I think over time, part of the growth has been really understanding who I am. And then, like you said, being unapologetic about the decisions that I make or that we make with our business, with being parents, with our lives.
Yeah. So I think, that point right there, define how you want to show up. Because, you don't have to show up the way that you did at a job or do at a job. You don't have to show up the way your father did or, whatever other male figure you had in your life. You get to define that as a man that is a husband and a father, whatever those terms might be. You get to define what that means to you and how you show up. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest piece. Also, talking to your significant other about it. This is one of those times and those places where you have to just bite the bullet and get vulnerable, because if you don't talk to your significant other about what you're feeling and what you're struggling with, they can't help you. They can't support you. So as a wife, if my husband, and obviously if you have a wife, if my wife, whoever my significant other is, if they are feeling something that is putting pressure on them to show up a certain way, that is making them feel guilty, that is making them have that negative self-talk and doubt, if I don't know that, I can't, there is nothing that I can do to help you. There's nothing that I can say that's going to make you feel better. Like, I can't show up the way I want to if you don't open up and tell me about those things. So I just want to stress that. I know that it's uncomfortable. It's something that as a partner in a relationship, you have to start doing. And if you aren't comfortable doing it with your significant other yet, I would really highly suggest you find a therapist or a counselor or somebody in a professional setting where you can start to share those uncomfortable feelings and get comfortable enough with them that you can open up to your significant other.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, because I know, I think we recommend everybody go to marriage therapy and even individual, because there's so much that you can do to help yourself by going through that. And I think one of the things we realized, especially when we started going together, was we're each going through our own stuff. And by coming together and realizing that, like, hey, it's not that you're good and I'm struggling. It's like we're both struggling with our own things. But by understanding that, recognizing it, we can then understand how to support each other better and then, work through each of our own stuff. And I remember there was a question that was asked to me is like, who in your life modeled this behavior? And it was a really profound question when you look back and say, oh, this was all I saw growing up. And where did I have that? And if I didn't have that, then I don't have something to follow. And once I have that, I'm good. And so, like, I think for us, there was just so much about not just our roles as parents, but then also our roles in our relationship. And by getting all of that really figured out, we now have a super clarity on what we want our lives to look like. We have more clarity on the decisions we make, and we're more confident that we're going to make a decision and not everyone has to agree with it. And that's okay, because it's our decision.
Yeah. And I think just the last point is, don't be afraid to stick to your path. Your path does not have to look like anybody else's in particular. I know a lot of us find mentors or people that we look up to in our lives, and then we think that we have to do exactly what they did. That's not how it is. You can look up to people, but you can still disagree with them. So if you have, male figures that you are looking up to in your entrepreneur part of your life or even in your personal life, just know that they're probably modeling a lot of behaviors that you agree with and that you want to eventually get to, but that there's probably also some that you don't necessarily enjoy or want to show up in your life in that way. So just know that you can take bits and pieces of the different people and the different environments and the different I just lost my word, the different people around you, and you can mold that into fitting on your path of how you want to show up.
Yeah. And you asked, a question earlier, and I guess the one final thing I would say with this is, when you're triggered, that's a sign that there's something deeper there, and you shouldn't just let that go. You should explore and understand why that thing triggers you. Like you were asking about the toxic masculinity. None of that stuff ever triggered me because I don't think a lot of it applies to me. But you see a lot of the people that are triggered, and usually the reason they're triggered is because that connects to them, or there's something that they're doing that doesn't make them feel good. So that's why I'm saying, like, when you do feel triggered on something, that's your opportunity to pay attention and to dive deeper and either say, I'm okay with this. This is who I am, and I'm not going to let that trigger or bother me. Or that's not who I want to be, and I do want to make that change.
I like that. I like that closing statement, sir. All right. Action items for today. I feel like mine's going to be the same. The same as for the mom episode. I swear it's not a cop-out. It's relevant. I want you guys, specifically guys for this one, because it's the Dad Guilt episode, want you guys to post up something that and this is going to be a tough one because you got to get vulnerable and you might have to share some emotions. Post up something that you're feeling guilty about right now and what actions you're going to take to shift that or to adjust that guilt.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you guys are struggling, know that we're here for you and know that I'm here for you. So if I can help at all, email me, tom@tomandariana.com. And tagging on to that, my action for you is to go and find somebody that you can talk to and have these conversations with. Go and look for a mentor or a peer or a group or a community, but don't do this alone. Like, none of us should have to go through this alone. And a lot of times we feel like we might be the only one experiencing this. But I want you guys to know that you're not. And even times where I'm like, I wish something like this existed. It exists. It's out there. There's a meetup or a conference or a group or something that is there. And you just have to take that step out to seek it, and then have the confidence to go and be vulnerable, because that will ultimately allow you to show up and really understand who you are and show up the way that you want to be.
All right. And I believe you actually have books for today.
I do. So I only have one of them physically with me, but now I need to go buy the second one. So the book is called,
you bought this when we had her.
52 Things Daughters Need from Their Dads, What Fathers Can Do to Build a Lasting Relationship. And I actually bought this in the airport on the way back from one of my trips when I was consulting, because I was feeling terrible about being a father and missing out on, some of these events. And so what was cool about this was that as you went through it, it just talked about these different things. So a daughter needs her dad to be a perfect father, to do stuff with only her. So like, we do daddy-daughter dates. That was something I took directly from here. I'm like, we need time individually with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
To get her a dog she can call her own. So there's all these different things in there. And I'll tell you, it is a Christian-based book. Like, we're not Christians, but a lot of the principles still apply. And there's actually 52 Things Sons Need from Their Fathers, which I realize I need to now go and buy.
We're a little delayed. Second child syndrome. Sorry, buddy.
But, what's super cool about this is that they just give you ideas and thoughts around how you can show up as a father and how you can, for your sons or your daughters, really show up and be that dad that they need you to be. Mm-hmm. So those books, highly recommend. They made a big difference for me, I know, when we had our daughter.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I feel like now I need to go and look for the mom version. I don't know if there is one, but I feel like somebody wrote one. I'm
sure somebody wrote the mom version. I'm sure there are probably 10 mom versions for every one dad version.
All right, you guys, it's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders.
And as always, I want you guys to remember that it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them. Are you dreaming of a life of financial freedom and more time to spend with your loved ones? Want to build your business to support that dream? You need Lifestyle Builders, a mentorship program designed to meet you where you are and give you strategic and custom guidance so you can build the business you need for the life you crave. Become a lifestyle builder at joinlifestylebuilders.com. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.